Time slips through our fingers like grains of sand, invisible until it's gone. I learned this truth on a crisp autumn morning when my phone rang at 3 a.m. My childhood friend Mark, only 32 years old, had suffered a massive heart attack. He'd spent the previous decade saying someday to his dreams, someday he'd start that business, someday he'd travel the world, someday he'd tell Sarah how he felt. But someday never came. I stood in that sterile hospital corridor, watching doctors fight to save his life, and the weight of everything left unsaid, undone, and unlived crashed over me like a tidal wave. Mark survived, but those harrowing hours changed both of us forever. They taught us the most fundamental truth of human existence. The future is promised to no one. You're sitting here right now, breath flowing in and out of your lungs, heart beating steady and strong. It feels permanent, doesn't it? Like there will always be another sunrise, another chance, another tomorrow. We move through our days as if we have an unlimited supply of them, postponing our deepest desires, our boldest dreams, our most authentic truths. I've spent 20 years sitting with people in their final moments, listening to their stories as a hospice volunteer. Not once, not a single time, has someone told me they wish they'd spend more time being cautious, playing it safe, or waiting for the perfect moment. Instead, their eyes fill with tears as they speak of chances not taken, of not expressed, dreams left to wither on the vine of someday. There was Louise, the brilliant artist who kept her paintings hidden in her attic, waiting until she felt good enough to share them. There was James, who spent 40 years in a job he hated because it was secure, while his passion for teaching children music remained just a weekend hobby. There was Maria, who never told a best friend she'd fallen in love with her, carrying that secret to her grave. Their stories aren't unique. They're your story, my story, the human story. We're all masters of postponement, architects of our own limitations, believing we have the luxury of time. But here's the truth that will set you free. This moment right now is all you can count on, not next year, not next month, not tomorrow. Now, I think about the last time you felt absolutely certain about something in your future. Maybe it was a job you thought would last forever, a relationship you believed would never end, or a parent you assumed would always be there to answer your calls. Life has a way of shattering our illusions of permanence, doesn't it? I remember sitting in my office 15 years ago, surrounded by awards, certificates, and all the trappings of success. I had the corner office, the impressive title, the lifestyle that checked all the societal boxes of achievement. I also had an ulcer at 35. A marriage that was quietly crumbling, and a persistent feeling that I was living someone else's life. Every morning I'd watch the sunrise from my office window and feel this persistent whisper in my soul, urging me to teach, to write, to speak truth to people's hearts. But I had a mortgage to pay, responsibilities to meet, expectations to fulfill. Someday, I told myself, when the timing is right, when I have enough saved, when the kids are older. Then my father dropped dead of an aneurysm at 58. No warning, no goodbye, no... I stood at his funeral listening to people share stories about his kindness, his humor, his quiet way of helping others, and I realized something that changed everything. He died mid-sentence. There were emails in his drafts folder. Half-finished projects in his garage, plans for next summer, books he meant to read, words he meant to say. We're all living midsentence. The only difference is some of us know it. That awareness doesn't have to paralyze you with fear. It can liberate you with clarity. When you truly understand that the future is promised to no one, every moment becomes an opportunity. Every breath becomes a decision point. Every heartbeat becomes a chance to step into your truth. I'm not talking about being reckless or abandoning your responsibilities. I'm talking about being honest with yourself about what matters most. I'm talking about stopping the endless negotiation with time that none of us are guaranteed. What burns in your heart? What truth have you been waiting to speak? What dream have you been putting on layaway, making small deposits of someday that may never come to fruition? There's a voice inside you that knows. It's the voice that whispers when everything else is quiet. The voice that keeps you awake at 3 a.m. wondering what if. The voice that feels like both your oldest friend and your greatest challenger. That voice isn't your enemy. It's not trying to disturb your peace or disrupt your life. It's trying to save you from the quiet desperation of a life half lived. I've watched too many people reach their final hours with that voice still whispering, still waiting to be heard. They die with their music still in them, their love still unexpressed, their gifts still wrapped in the paper of fear and hesitation. But I've also witnessed the opposite. I've seen people wake up to the precious impermanence of life and let it catalyze them into action, like Sarah, a woman in her 60s who had always wanted to learn to play the cello. "I'm too old," she told me. "It would take years to get good." "And how old will you be in those same years if you don't learn?" I asked her. Today, Sarah plays in a community orchestra. Is she the best cellist there? No. Doesn't matter. Not to her, not anymore. Because she understood something vital. The joy isn't in the perfection. It's in the doing, the trying, the living. Or consider Marcus, a corporate lawyer who spent 20 years building a successful career he hated. Every day he drove past a rundown community center in his neighborhood, thinking about how he could help the kids there. Every day, he told himself, it wasn't practical to change course. Then he lost a close colleague to cancer. The man was 43. At the funeral, Marcus listened to the eulogy and realized something chilling. If he died tomorrow, his own eulogy would be a list of cases won and billable hours logged, not lives touched or differences made. The next day, Marcus started volunteering at that community center. Within 6 months, he had developed a legal aid program for underprivileged families. Within a year, he had transitioned to part-time at his firm. Today, he runs a nonprofit that has helped thousands of families navigate the legal system and find justice. Was it scary? Yes. Was it messy? Absolutely. Did everything work out perfectly according to plan? Of course not. But Marcus will tell you he's never felt more alive, more purposeful, more himself. Because here's what happens when you stop waiting for somebody. Life starts happening now. The energy you spent postponing, planning, and perfecting gets redirected into actual living. The mental space occupied by what is becomes filled with what is and what could be. Think about a time when you were fully alive, completely present in a moment, fully engaged in an activity, utterly true to yourself. Maybe it was creating something with your hands, helping someone in need, expressing yourself without fear, or pursuing something solely because it lit you up inside. That feeling, that's not a special occasion. That's not a lucky accident. That's what it feels like to live in alignment with your truth. That's what it feels like to stop negotiating with time and start using it. Top transition begins with a simple but profound shift. Stop treating your life like a rough draft that you'll edit into perfection someday. Start treating it like the only version you're guaranteed to have. This doesn't mean you have to quit your job tomorrow or completely overhaul your life today. It means you have to start, take one step, make one change, have one conversation, write one page, make one move toward what matters most to you. The universe doesn't care about your timing. Life doesn't wait for your schedule to clear up. Death doesn't check your calendar for a convenient opening. I learned this lesson again just last month, sitting with a man in his final hours. He was a brilliant musician who spent his life teaching middle school math because it was the responsible choice. I thought I had time, he whispered. I thought there would be time after retirement to really pursue music. His last request, to have someone play his compositions, pieces he'd written in secret over decades but never shared. As the violinist performed his work in that hospital room, tears rolled down his face. "Sounds even better than I imagined," he said. It was beautiful. It was moving. It was too late for him to hear more. Don't let that be your story. Don't let your music die unplayed, your words die unspoken, your love die unexpressed, your gifts die unopened. The future is not promised, but this moment, this exact moment, is yours. Look around this room. Feel the chair supporting you. Notice your breath moving in and out. Listen to your heartbeat. This is not a dress rehearsal. This is not a practice run. This is your life happening right now in real time. What would change if you really believed that? What would you do differently if you knew? Really knew that the future is promised to no one? Would you finally write that book? Would you tell that person how you feel? Would you start that business? Would you heal that relationship? Would you forgive? Would you dare? The clock is ticking, not to pressure you, but to free you, not to scare you, but to wake you up to the extraordinary gift of being alive right now, in this moment, with the power to choose. If not now, when? Every breath is offering you an opportunity. If not here, where? Every moment is presenting you with a choice. If not this, what? The future is promised to no one but the present. This sacred, precious present is yours to claim. What are you waiting for? I once asked a room full of people to raise their hand if they had a dream they'd never pursued. Every hand went up. Then I asked them to keep their hand raised if the only thing stopping them was fear. Not a single hand went down. Fear is natural. Fear kept our ancestors alive. Fear stops us from walking into traffic or touching a hot stove. But somewhere along the way, fear stopped protecting our survival and started preventing our living. We fear failure, yes. But more than that, we fear success. We fear change. We fear becoming who we might become if we stop playing small. We fear disappointing others by disappointing ourselves less. Let me tell you about Rachel. She worked in accounting for 30 years, carrying around a notebook full of children's stories she'd written on lunch breaks and late at night. When I met her, she was dying of pancreatic cancer. She showed me that notebook, pages yellowed with age, corners soft. I always thought they weren't good enough, she said. I was waiting until they were perfect. I had those stories published after she died. At her memorial service, we gave copies to everyone who attended. I watched grown men cry as they read them. A children's book publisher who attended called them raw, honest, and exactly what children need to read. Rachel never knew. She never saw a child's eyes light up at her words. She never heard a parent say, "This story helped my kid feel less alone." She never experienced the joy of knowing her gift had touched another soul. Why? Because she was waiting for permission. From whom? From that mythical authority we've all created in our minds. The one who decides if we're ready, worthy, good enough. That authority doesn't exist. No one is coming to tell you it's time. No one is going to tap you on the shoulder and say, now you're ready. Now you have permission to live your truth. I spent 7 years counseling people through major life transitions, career changes, relationships, personal transformations. Want to know the most common regret I heard? Not the paths taken, but the paths not taken. Not the risks that failed, but the risks never dared. Not the times they tried and fell short, but the times they never tried at all. Consider Michael, a man who spent his entire adult life working 60-hour weeks, promising his wife and kids he'd have more time soon. He had a heart attack at 49. Lying in that hospital bed, he didn't think about the reports he hadn't filed or the meetings he hadn't attended. He thought about the baseball games he'd missed, the dance recitals he'd skipped, the family dinners he'd been too busy for. He survived. And you know what? He changed everything. Not someday, not eventually, but immediately. He restructured his work, set boundaries, and started showing up for his life. Was it easy? No. Did his income take a hit? Yes. Does he regret it? Not for a second. I realized he told me that I was trading my life for things that wouldn't matter to anyone at my funeral. What are you trading your life for? Look, I know it's not simple. I know you have responsibilities, obligations, people depending on you. I know the mortgage needs to be paid and food needs to be on the table. I'm not suggesting you abandon your commitments or act recklessly. I'm suggesting you stop using those responsibilities as an excuse to abandon yourself, because here's what I've learned from 2 decades of working with people facing their mortality. It's possible to be responsible and true to yourself. It's possible to meet your obligations and honor your dreams. It's possible to be practical and passionate. The key is to stop thinking in terms of either and start thinking in terms of both. Take Anna, a single mother of 3 who always wanted to be a photographer. She couldn't quit her job as a nurse to pursue photography full-time. Her children needed to eat. But she could take 1 photography class each semester at the community college. She could practice on weekends. She could build a portfolio 1 photo at a time. It took her 6 years. But today she runs a successful photography business. She still works 1 shift a week as a nurse, both because it's financially prudent and because she loves it. She didn't have to choose between security and she found a way to have both. Or consider James, a teacher who dreamed of writing novels. He couldn't take a year off to write. He had a family to support, but he could write for 1 hour every morning before his kids woke up. 1 hour every day. No excuses. That hour added up. 1 page became 10. Became 50, became 300. Today, he's published 3 novels. Is he Stephen King? No. Has he quit teaching? No. But he's living his truth 1 hour at a time. These people aren't special. They don't have secret advantages or unusual talents. They simply decided to stop waiting for someday and start living today. Time is going to pass anyway. The question is not whether you have time. The question is how you'll spend the time you have. Think about something you've been postponing, something that matters to you, something that feels true. Got it in your mind. Now, how long have you been waiting to do this thing? 6 months? A year? 5 years? How much longer are you willing to wait? Because while you're waiting, life is happening. While you're waiting, time is passing. While you're waiting, your one wild and precious life is unfolding, moment by moment, without your full participation. I once worked with a woman named Sofia who had a profound fear of public speaking. She had important things to say, wisdom to share, experiences that could help others. But the thought of standing in front of a crowd paralyzed her. One day, she received news that her best friend had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Her friend's first words after sharing the diagnosis: "I wish I'd been braver." Those 4 words shook Sofia to her core. She realized that safety wasn't keeping her safe. It was keeping her small. The next day, she joined Toastmasters. Was she terrified? Absolutely. Did she shake like a leaf during her first speech? You bet. Did it matter? Not one bit. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is feeling the fear and acting anyway. Courage is deciding that something else is more important than your fear. Today, Sofia speaks regularly at conferences and events. Still scared. Sometimes. But she's no longer letting that fear make her decision. What fear are you letting make your decisions? I worked with a man once, let's call him David, who had a successful career in finance. Good salary, nice office, respectable title. He also had a secret passion for cooking. Not just cooking, creating experiences through food. Every weekend, he would cook elaborate meals for friends and family. His dinner parties became legendary. For years, people told him he should open a restaurant. For years, he laughed it off as impractical, too risky, too late in life. Too many things could go wrong. Then his brother died suddenly in a car accident. At the funeral, amid the grief and shock, one of his brother's closest friends shared a conversation from just weeks before. David's brother had said, "My biggest regret is watching my brother deny his true calling because he's afraid to fail." David had never known his brother saw through him so clearly, had never known his brother carried that sadness for him, had never realized that his fear of failure was actually failing those who loved him most because they wanted him to be fully alive, fully himself, fully expressed in the world. 6 months later, David opened a small supper club, not a full restaurant. He wasn't ready for that leap, but a weekly dining experience in a converted warehouse. He kept his day job at first, running the supper club on weekends only. Was it hard? Incredibly? Were there failures along the way? Absolutely. Did everything work out exactly as planned? Of course not. He came alive. His eyes lit up when he talked about work, both the successes and the challenges. He started sleeping better. His relationships improved. Even his performance at his finance job got better because he was no longer carrying the weight of an unlived dream. 2 years later, he made the full transition. Today, he runs one of the most successful dining experiences in his city, not because he's the world's greatest chef or the smartest businessman, but because he's doing what he was meant to do. His passion shines through in every meal, every interaction, every decision. The point isn't that you need to quit your job or start a business. The point is that you need to stop denying your truth. Stop postponing your life. Stop waiting for permission to be who you already are. Because here's what I know for certain. The cost of denial is far greater than the cost of failure. The price of perpetual postponement is far higher than the price of trying and coming up short. I've sat with too many people in their final days, listening to them talk about the lives they wish they'd lived, the loves they wish they'd expressed, the chances they wish they'd taken. I've held too many hands that were still reaching for dreams that time had put forever out of reach. Don't let that be your story. Don't let fear write your epitaph. Don't let comfort be your cage. The future is not promised to anyone. Not to the young, not to the healthy, not to the careful, not to the prepared. The future is not promised to those who wait, to those who plan, to those who hesitate. The only thing you can count on is this moment, this breath, this heartbeat, this chance to choose differently. What will you do with it? Sometimes people ask me if I'm afraid of death. No. I'm afraid of not living before death arrives. I'm afraid of carrying my gifts to the grave unopened. I'm afraid of leaving love unspoken, songs unsung, stories untold. I've watched too many sunsets from office windows thinking tomorrow. I've had too many conversations with people who died before tomorrow came. I've seen too many tomorrows turn into nevers. Let me tell you about Peter. He was 43 when I met him, sitting in a coffee shop, staring at a blank resignation letter on his laptop. He'd spent 20 years building someone else's dream while his own gathered dust in a drawer. I can't do it, he told me. I have 2 kids in school. A mortgage. What if you succeed? I asked. What if you don't fail? What if everything you're afraid of is actually less terrifying than continuing to live a life that's too small for your spirit? He didn't sign that resignation letter that day, or the next day, or the next. 3 months later, his position was eliminated in a corporate restructuring. The universe, tired of waiting for him to jump, had pushed. You know what happened? He fell. Then he flew. Today, Peter runs a successful consulting business helping other people transition from corporate jobs to entrepreneurship. His kids see him more than ever. They see something else too. They see what it looks like when someone chooses courage over comfort, growth over safety, truth over fear. My daughter told me something last week, she said, Dad, I'm not afraid to fail anymore because you showed me failure isn't the worst thing. Not trying is. That's the real legacy we leave. Not our successes or failures, but our choices. Not our achievements or mistakes, but our courage or our surrender. Every day, we make a choice. Every moment, we cast a vote for the person we'll become, the life we'll live, the legacy we'll leave. I worked with a woman named Claire who spent her entire adult life saying, I can't do her dreams of becoming a teacher. Too expensive to go back to school. Too difficult to change careers. Too risky to start over. Then her mother died. Cleaning out her mother's house, Claire found a box of her childhood papers. Among them was a letter she'd written at age 8. When I grow up, I want to be a teacher because I want to help kids believe in themselves. Claire sat on her mother's floor, holding that letter, and realized something. She hadn't outgrown that dream. She'd abandoned it. She hadn't changed her mind. She'd lost her courage. That letter became her permission slip. That 8-year-old's clarity became her compass. That night, she applied to a teaching certification program. Was it easy? No. She worked full-time and studied at night. She lived on ramen noodles and coffee. She questioned her sanity at least. But here's what she didn't do. She didn't quit. She didn't let fear win. She didn't let age or circumstances or other people's opinions stop her from answering the call of her own heart. Today, Claire teaches 3rd grade. Her students don't care that she came to teaching later in life. They care that she shows up every day with passion and purpose. They care that she believes in them the way she finally learned to believe in herself. I thought I was too old to start over, she told me. Now I realize I was too young to give up. You're not too old. You're not too young. You're not too anything. You're exactly where you are with exactly the resources you have, facing exactly the choice that matters. Will you live your truth today, or will you wait for a tomorrow that might never come? I once asked a room full of hospice patients what they'd do differently if they could live their lives again. Their answers were surprisingly simple. I'd laugh more. I'd love bigger. I'd stop trying to please everyone else. I'd tell the truth sooner. I'd start now instead of waiting until I was ready. I'd risk looking foolish for the things that matter to me. I'd listen to my heart instead of my fears. Notice what's not on that list. I wish I'd played it safer. I wish I'd dreamed smaller. I wish I'd waited longer. Not one person said they wished they'd been more cautious, more reserved, more practical. Not one person wished they'd spent more time being appropriate, acceptable, or approved of. They wished they'd been more alive, more true, more courageous, more themselves. You don't have to wait until the end to learn this lesson. You don't have to wait until your time is running out to decide your time matters. Every morning the sun rises, offering you a new chance to live deliberately, to choose consciously, to act courageously. Every heartbeat is an invitation to stop waiting and start living. Think of one thing, just one thing, you've been postponing. One truth you've been silencing, one dream you've been deferring. Now imagine I could guarantee you only had 1 year left to live. Would you still wait? Would that thing still be optional? Would that truth still be silent? Would that dream still be negotiable? Precis what I know. You don't have a year, you don't have a month, you don't have tomorrow, you have now, this moment, this breath, this chance. The future is not promised to anyone, not to the careful, not to the prepared, not to the ones who wait until they're ready. The future belongs to those who show up now, who start now, who choose now. Maria waited 40 years to paint because she thought she needed formal training first. Then she got sick. In her hospital room, she finally started painting. With children's watercolors her grandchildren brought her. You know what she said? I wasted so much time thinking I needed to know how before I could begin. But beginning teaches you how. Beginning teaches you how. You don't need to know how it will end. You don't need to see the whole path. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to take one step, make one choice, tell one truth, write one page, paint one picture, sing one note. The rest will reveal itself in the doing. Stop asking for permission to be who you are. Stop waiting for the perfect moment to live your truth. Stop postponing joy until you've earned it. Stop delaying love until you deserve it. Stop putting conditions on your own liberation, because time doesn't care about your schedule. Death doesn't check your readiness. Life doesn't wait for your permission. The future is not promised, but this moment, this sacred, precious, unrepeatable moment. What will you do with it? Will you spend it wondering what if? Will you spend it waiting for someday? Will you spend it rehearsing for a life you never actually live? Or will you claim it? Will you use it? Will you fill it with your truth, your courage, your love? The choice is yours. The time is now. The person you're waiting for is you. Remember Rachel's stories, hidden in that notebook until it was too late. Remember Peter's daughter, learning courage from his choices. Remember Claire's letter, written by an 8-year-old who knew exactly who she was meant to be. Remember Maria's paintings, finally flowing once she stopped waiting to be ready. Their stories are your story. Their choices are your choices. Their time is your time. The future is not promised to anyone. But this moment is yours. Take it. Use it. Live it now.